Two women in their early 30s were laughing loudly. The blonde with almond-shaped green eyes giggled quietly, while the brunette with lively, huge gray eyes burst into unrestrained laughter. The source of their amusement was a husband's announcement on a dating site that they found on the tablet, which Dean either accidentally or intentionally left unlocked. Here's what was written there. "So, I'm that desirable man that women often dream of. And now, their dreams can come true. I'm barely over 40. I'm cool, fun, youthful, and not too poor. I enjoy fishing and surfing, ride an expensive bike. Honestly divorced when I realized I couldn't live with just one woman, even one as cool as my ex-wife. I'm not very old. I just turned 40. Not mad at women, but I have a vast experience in female betrayal. Please write only if you're ready to meet on my terms. You, a tall blonde, over 5'9", light eyes, clothing size, up to M. Bust, 3ID to 4TH size, hourglass figure. Intelligence is welcomed but not necessary. No hopes for marriage and financial support. Be ready to attend cultural events with me." This announcement was accompanied by epic photos of a not-so-tall but quite muscular and broad-shouldered brunette with prominent facial features. A low forehead and short legs made him look a bit like a Neanderthal. The hunched back and bowed head suggested similar faults. Dean was involved in boxing and wrestling in his youth, so it's not surprising that he truly looked like a man ready for life's punches at any moment. The tall blonde, one of those who laughed heartily at this announcement, was his legal wife, and the second giggler with long curly red hair was her cousin. In fact, Dean was still the legal husband of Vanessa. Moreover, they had a common son. And yet, he had no intention of getting a divorce, although he never ceased to repeat every day that his wife was completely unsuitable for him and that he made a mistake in choosing her. Vanessa tried to convince him to at least live separately, but her husband refused even that. So, they suffered. He had mistresses, and she endured him with difficulty. But Dean wouldn't let her go. "Vanessa, how do you tolerate him? I understand if a man secretly meets with one or two, or discreetly goes with friends for a so-called massage. But your Dean has long crossed all boundaries. How many of these ladies does he have?" 10. Complained the cousin of the tall blonde. "Phoebe, you know, every family has many secrets. I'm okay with my husband's behavior, so why should it bother you?" It was evident that to her, her husband was not at all as indifferent as she wished to show. But the petite brunette seemed oblivious to this protest. Finally, Phoebe reminded her sister that Dean had also been a terrible father last summer. When he took his 12-year-old son to the countryside, the boy went completely crazy, started swearing, became unruly, and even tried alcohol. Dean considered himself a connoisseur of expensive drinks and had a cellar in the house where his late mother lived. But why allow his own son to try something like that? "Vanessa, it's up to you, but if he's seeking revenge for your one attempt to part ways, we need to do something about it. Let's come up with a plan to rein him in. You'll see, it'll end with him leaving you and leaving you with nothing," warned the cousin and loyal friend. "That's the thing. I'm terribly afraid for Caleb, my son. Otherwise, I would have crushed Dean to pieces long ago and left immediately," the blonde thought sadly. Despite her efforts to stay calm, her cheeks flushed with anger. Phoebe genuinely loved her, but she couldn't fathom how she became entangled in a web of love and hatred. She tried everything to break free, but only found herself more entwined. These relationships were a continuous and unrelenting emotional torture for both of them. Each spouse seemed to have made it their goal to break the other. Phoebe doesn't know anything. She never told her that she once loved her husband deeply. She believed she could melt the ice in the heart of the bachelor who got married for the first time at 33. But no matter how hard they tried, nothing worked. She was just a part of the decor. Dean could easily replace the tall blonde with a younger and more interesting model at any moment. That's when she decided to do something drastic. She struck at the most vulnerable point. She gave birth to a son from his sworn enemy Chad. It didn't help her fall out of love with her husband completely, but it made things easier. Vanessa knew how obsessed Dean was with the idea of an heir. Somehow, none of his mistresses could give him that. Only she could. And now, as she saw the indifferent face of the man she once loved passionately, and now painfully and strangely, she took pleasure in realizing that she had played her own game in a crucial way. But this was her secret. Even Chad, the sworn enemy of her husband, doesn't remember anything from what happened in that country house where a dozen families celebrated Christmas. Vanessa, what's going on? Are you going to talk to me? Your face looks strange. Are you okay? Is there something I don't know? Phoebe seemed to have been trying to get her attention for a while, so she decided to give her a light tap on the cheeks. Vanessa woke up from this gentle touch. Phoebe, there's a lot you don't know, but you guessed the most important reason why I don't leave Dean. I worry about my son's safety. Caleb is going through adolescence, and on top of that, there's a father who seeks revenge to me through him. Vanessa finally let slip. Why is he seeking revenge? Phoebe asked. Well, you see, I didn't leave him because of infidelity. As I told you back then, it was something else. The blonde raised her chin and looked at the ceiling. She always did this, ever since childhood. This gesture always meant one thing. Now Vanessa would finally tell at least a half-truth. From her reserved cousin, you could expect something like this only once in a decade. Vanessa, what caused you to break up last summer? Phoebe saw that her sister was about to shut down again, and then nothing could pull words out of her. So she decided to apply a bit of pressure. Well, there was this thing. In short, Dean found out that my photo exhibition was paid for by Chad, Vanessa reluctantly uttered. By the way, he also paid for the upcoming exhibition. But Dean shouldn't find out about that. I know I can trust you, so I'm telling you. Well, the same Chad who set up your Dean even before you met. The brunette exclaimed, pacing anxiously around the room. Yeah, it turned out that way. It happened accidentally. Vanessa's face involuntarily spread into a rather triumphant smirk. It was clear that if it was accidental, the blonde was quite pleased with it. So Phoebe couldn't help but slyly wink in response. That's what he deserves. It would be the ultimate move if you also cheated on him with Chad. Phoebe wasn't such a bad person after all. But this Dean turned her lively cousin into an unstable mother, also universal scapegoat. So let him deal with his own affairs. Well, Phoebe, do you think I'm capable of such a thing? She almost extinguished the gleam of schadenfreude in her eyes. However, her friends still noticed it, wisely choosing not to comment on it. Vanessa, should I share my plan now? Phoebe understood that it was the right time to unveil the audacious scheme that was supposed to make Dean leave her cousin alone. Okay, go ahead. You already know I'm far from being an angel. Vanessa smiled. At least she had vented a bit, and it felt a little easier. She was grateful to her cousin for pulling some truth out of her. It was impossible to continue this battle for her son's safety and against her own jealousy alone. Well, finally, I'll get to know the old Vanessa. I was starting to worry that you were turning into a robot housewife who respects her husband for life. She then shared her plan. It was quite straightforward. Since, for some unknown reason, Dean always chose mistresses with the same type as his wife, and also regularly attended his wife's exhibitions with his mistresses. The plan was to simply hire a tall blonde with not very high moral principles, pay her, and ask her to report on the situation. In that case, this lady should be not only smart, but also shouldn't fall in love with my husband. Is someone like that going to cost too much? Vanessa knew that Phoebe earned much more than she did, but she didn't want to exploit her cousin's financial capabilities. Well, I already have a good option in mind. I'll introduce you to her soon. You'll see, this lady is only after money. She's been through so much with her two ex-husbands that she doesn't even consider any man as a permanent option in her worst nightmare. promised Phoebe. They then shifted to lighter topics, discussing TV shows, fashion, and the weather, typical female banter. But both of them were already convinced that serious steps towards separating Vanessa from Dean would be taken very soon. Meanwhile, Dean was having a quarrel with one of his mistresses. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't write intelligence not required anymore, he thought. Rita had simply become tiresome with her jealousy. If she found out he was married, she might devour him. But there was nothing he could do. He had to endure it. He couldn't quite understand what attracted him to her. There was something oddly familiar about her. Dean, you're a true bachelor, not interested in a committed relationship. You just want to play around. It boosts your libido, Rita told him once again. Rita, there's nothing to boost for now, as you could see. I just haven't felt that spark. I'm not ready to make a choice. Of course, he was lying. He had long decided that he had no reason to get married, even if he were free. And he had no intention of leaving his wife. But he wouldn't tell her the whole truth. Only fools did that. So the experienced liar continued his deception. He pretended there were few beautiful and well-groomed women, especially his age. The rest, according to him, only thought they looked elegant and young, liking only themselves and fools without taste. He couldn't reveal everything to her. He was married and had simply chosen a few women as mistresses. He met them as he pleased. Each one tried to win his attention, taking great care of themselves. If he left his wife and married one of them, he would face a heap of complaints and a sense of inflated self-importance. Instantly, intellectual efforts and the desire to portray a profound personality would vanish. The new wife would secretly lie on the couch, watching TV shows and silly programs. And he hadn't even sorted things out with his old wife yet. He wanted to savor the rare silence that Rita could provide. But she got worked up again. Why do you even date me? I'm just a gym teacher at school, 10 years older than you. No refinement or elegance, she pouted, looking 15 years older. She even furrowed her forehead. Yes, these types don't bother with mirror workouts. Yet, Dean appreciated her in his own way. Not the worst specimen in his collection, and kind, although a bit of a bore. He considered saying something sincere and pleasant to her, but remembered that giving women the slightest slack was a mistake. The moment they sense a man giving in, they start attacking. That wasn't part of Dean's plan, so he opted for generic words. Because you can appreciate my uniqueness. You have good taste. Otherwise, you wouldn't have chosen me. Rita wasn't entirely convinced, shaking her head doubtfully. She wasn't the smartest, but she understood that Dean wanted something from her. She just couldn't figure out what exactly. They met at the school where she taught physical education to his son Caleb. A good kid, although a bit mischievous. But calm boys in their teens would raise more concerns than troublemakers like Dean's son. Rita even wanted to talk to Dean about why he and his wife Vanessa had separated. She had her reasons to learn more about Vanessa, but he didn't want to discuss it. Caleb resembled Dean's wife, not him. Rita didn't notice any special closeness between father and son. However, he persistently came to school for his son every time. There was only one exception, which allowed Rita to see his ex. When she asked him why a mature boy couldn't work home from school, he always got upset, saying it was none of her business. Once, he lied, saying it was to see her, Rita, more often. However, the lie sounded so unreliable that even an experienced liar like him felt uncomfortable. This version was never brought up again. Rita knew she didn't love Dean. At the moment, she needed to fulfill important obligations. He wasn't as much of a ladies' man as he seemed at first glance. There was something about him that attracted her. But even at 50, she never thought she'd attach herself to a greedy womanizer and liar. Between them was a rather heavy history from the past. Fortunately, the current lover didn't remember it. Dean hardly ever gave her gifts or took her to restaurants. On official holidays, she received 3 silly yellow roses from him. And every time, She joked, "Are you hinting that we're breaking up?" But he didn't catch the hints. The next time, those silly flowers again, which she didn't like. They resembled Dean, no fragrance. Petals fell quickly, and they pricked unusually sharp thorns. Rita wished to delve into her lover's thoughts, to understand if there was even a drop of genuine feelings toward her. If he directly said what he needed from her, she could at least trust him. It wouldn't scare her off. Rita didn't expect reciprocity from him, but he was a mystery. However, if Rita could truly access Dean's thoughts now, she would find only his wife, Vanessa, there, and she wouldn't like it at all. Dean couldn't help himself. He tried to stop loving Vanessa and gain control over her. It worked with all women except his mother and wife. His mother always favored his brother, Chad. That's why he came to hate Chad. Their paths had long diverged. Many thought Chad cheated him in business. In reality, it was the other way around. But Dean portrayed him as a scoundrel, and people believed it because they didn't publicize their relationship, and no one saw personal motives. One partner deceived another. What's surprising about that? No need for explanations. There's no need to confess your own villainy. So, he lied to Chad about being brothers and needing to stick together. Then, he couldn't act honestly. And now what? Cry about it. In the end, he didn't want to deceive him. It just turned out that way. As for Vanessa, she was always an unattainable dream. No matter how much he lived with her, he couldn't understand her. And therefore, he couldn't possess her completely. Intimacy meant not much for Dean. He wanted to understand the soul of the woman he loved, occupy the main place there, but still remain invulnerable to her charm. Was he asking for too much? But Vanessa couldn't put him in the main place in her life. It's not that she didn't love him. She did once, very much. But her own plans always came first. Often foolish, insane plans. She set up a dining room for homeless people, then got them employed. Afterward, she helped sell paintings to some strange people who, indeed, were talented. Now she organizes exhibitions and takes photographs herself. When he stopped giving her money for all these ideas, she didn't even protest. She found a way to earn money within 6 months. Although she used to work as a literature teacher, she doesn't ask him for anything, but he wishes she would. Better from him than from that scoundrel Chad. He probably hates him and wants revenge. Suppose the detested brother gave money for the last major exhibition. She did it to spite him. But where does she get money anyway? She's involved in some nonsense. Dear, you scare me. I have this feeling that every time you wake up in your own dimension, I see you, but you don't fully belong to me. Once he drank heavily and confessed everything to her. Vanessa laughed but said very seriously, Dean, a person comes into this world alone and leaves alone. I won't let you into my world. I won't consult with you. Be content with the evenings I can give you. So, she doesn't suffer from my coldness. He felt uncomfortable with this thought. Then he started earning more, looking better. Nothing worked. Whether he gave her money or not, it made no difference. Maybe that's when he became stingy. He openly pursued women, tried to provoke jealousy, but she just stopped sleeping with him. She didn't say a word about it. Vanessa always soared to her heights. She had wings given by nature, and he added wax ones. They melted when he let himself rise too high. He couldn't catch up with her. Dean, what's wrong with you? The mistress pulled him out of his memories again, and he was grateful to her because they became too painful. Rita, you know, I'm not a human but a copy. A fake. His hand reached for another glass. I seem to have overloaded myself. But it's okay. It's just Rita, safe. She won't tell anyone anything. She won't laugh at him. So right now, Dean was talking not so much to her as to himself. Later, he would put on the invented version of being successful, in demand, valued, and good. Vanessa would never know about moments of his doubts or his hopeless love for her, although she probably wouldn't have felt any schadenfreude about it. His wife doesn't even hate him. She doesn't want to waste energy on contempt. Vanessa just doesn't care. She once loved him when she didn't know much, but then nothing was left. Well, why be surprised? Dean himself didn't like to delve into the dark depths of his own soul very much. Once he tried hard to become good, but no one loved him, not even his own mother. So why bother? Dean, come on. You're not yourself. Will you stay with me tonight? Rita asked hopefully. She always tried to convince him to spend the whole night together and have breakfast in the morning. But he always refused. Rita, everything's okay. I'll call a taxi, and I'll pick up the car in the morning. You know I have to ask my son how his day went tonight. Dean lied to his mistress that he was raising his son alone because his wife could only live her own life, and she didn't care about the family. Rita didn't calm down, insisting that he should stay, or she would go with him. But Dean just silently pushed her away. He had a rule. If you can't explain anything to a woman, get angry, frown sternly in silence, as if it's her fault. And that's what he did. And Rita really quieted down. She stopped insisting. He hastily started putting on his clothes. And when he went outside, he thought, but as long as my wife thinks I'm undefeated, one day she might love me again. Every woman has moments of weakness. After all, Vanessa is just a human. She can be touched, softened, and forgive that old story that made her hate me completely. He thought when getting into the car. Vanessa was preparing with fear for another event for artists that she organized. She knew that her husband would come again with one of his blondes, all of whom looked like her. I've been telling you for a long time. Let's infiltrate a spy into the enemy's camp. All you have to do is respond to this fool's ad. And I already have a reliable lady in mind. Vanessa's friend said again. Phoebe, maybe he'll come to his senses, and at least he'll stop embarrassing me in public. I don't want an open quarrel, Vanessa said. Friend, listen. With such husband-good relationships, there will be nothing ever, Phoebe said, pointing at the broad-shouldered man next to whom worked an almost exact copy of Vanessa, only slightly taller and much younger. Look at this scoundrel. He even ordered a dress from the same store where I bought mine, Vanessa exclaimed. Exactly. And you keep enduring. It will only get worse. Such people don't understand nicely, Phoebe continued. Vanessa sighed as she looked at her rival. I wonder why they even meet with Dean. It's not like he supports them, she thought, and she decided to simply approach and ask this next question to her blonde copy. There were also some other questions for her. Maybe she had drunk too much, but she really wanted to annoy her husband. Phoebe, somehow distract my ex. I need to talk to this blonde, Vanessa said. Sure thing. Right away. Her friend's eyes sparkled with excitement. Obviously, something interesting was about to happen. She quickly approached Dean and sweetly said in a voice that even the most experienced listener wouldn't detect a hint of sarcasm. Oh, Dean, your wife prepared a buffet for the chosen ones, only for a few people. You're on the list. How do you feel about that? Phoebe innocently fluttered her eyelashes. Hello, Phoebe. Doesn't look like my wife at all. But why not? Why not? Was their family phrase. Dean's mom used to say it often. True, the continuation usually didn't promise anything good. The last time she said it, she made the final decision to evict him from the family apartment for no apparent reason. As it seemed to him, his mother had been gone for a long time, but now she appeared before him as if alive. She always wore a red dress with a high neck and long sleeves for events. Similar outfits were now on his wife and mistress. On purpose, he made Marta, his companion for today, wear a similar dress. After all, two women in red looked less like a ghost of his mother than one. Is his personal psychologist, Mr. Branson, right? Is he trying to resolve issues not with his wife, but with his mother? He still can't let go of the situation and keeps trying to prove something. And if so, let them all go with their advice. It's easy to say, work through the pain. Idiots don't knows that it could take a whole lifetime. Dean, are you feeling unwell? Asked his wife's friend. Where did you get that idea? He said. Did you just send someone out loud? Or did I imagine it? She looked at him with clear gray eyes. So you couldn't suspect her of provoking him? But Dean lowered his head even further than usual and frowned even more. I don't know. Shall we go to the private reception? Or shall we wait for my betrothed? He emphasized the word betrothed and chuckled hoarsely. It didn't bode well. Vanessa will be here any minute. She needs to powder her nose and all that. You know, women have their secrets, Phoebe said as if nothing was wrong. Seems like too many secrets. Dean didn't even think about hiding that he knew Phoebe was clearly not on his side. Nevertheless, he moved towards a small room with oak doors. Phoebe opened the door with a key, and indeed, there were snacks on trays inside. So Dean calmly entered, suspecting nothing. The main guests are invited first, and I'll call the others now, said the petite brunette. Oh, these ladies. If only they'd occasionally hold back their flow of hypocrisy. Is it so hard to just be silent if you can't say anything interesting or truthful? Dean thought, but he was glad to take a break himself. The room had soft chairs and sofas, so he gladly sat down in one of them. Yesterday he had overindulged and talked too much. But it was okay. Rita could be trusted. She was the only one among his lovers who loved him even a little, more like a friend, but still, something. If he said the same thing to today's companion, Marta, the temptation would be great. She would pry into the details for the rest of their relationship. And, of course, the relationship would end quickly. There are plenty of women who want someone like him, well-groomed, brutal, erudite, and confident. Moreover, his legend of being single works flawlessly. Women believe what they want to believe. This law always works. Today everything irritated him. His wife's too revealing dress, the young people buzzing around her, and the stupid event itself a gathering of idlers. Can't Vanessa just love him once and for all? Then there would be no need to attend idiotic exhibitions with various fools. He felt like having a drink. On the table, Dean saw the only bottle of water. Strange. Only one bottle. Well, the main thing is that it's enough for me, and the waiters will bring others to the rest, he thought. Dean unscrewed the plastic cap, which gave in easily, poured himself a glass of water, and took a sip. Immediately, a pleasant drowsiness engulfed him. The couch was very comfortable, so Dean even dozed off a bit. The dream was pleasant. Vanessa crawled before him on her knees, begging him not to leave. She wore that almost completely covered red dress with a slit that exposed one of her magnificent long, slender legs. At the same time, the cunning Phoebe calmly and without any remorse locked the door. She then approached the security guard hired for the event and said, "Freddie, my dear, there's a guest here acting very strangely. Apparently, he came under the influence of some substances. If he knocks on the door, do something to either keep him from leaving or let him discreetly leave with you through the back door. Just make sure he doesn't come back here. We don't need any problems." Officially, Phoebe was also Vanessa's secretary today, so the security guard had no doubts about doing as she said. After all, he would earn decent cash in hand for this event duty right after it ended. Of course, it wasn't the pinnacle of his dreams, but security guards find it challenging to find work these days. Handling a slightly unstable guy was no problem at all. "Sure, Phoebe. No problem. Go ahead with the event. I'll tell my partner that I have a small assignment here, and Howard will keep an eye on my part of the hall," said Fred, a good-natured blonde guy with blue eyes. Having completed her cunning mission, Phoebe approached her friend and reported that the path to the rival was clear, and all security measures were taken. "Fred is a reliable guy. He'll handle it. But I worry Dean might start a fight," Vanessa said. Vanessa rarely saw her husband in anger, and he never hit her specifically. But once, during the Christmas holidays, she witnessed her husband fighting Chad, his longtime enemy who had robbed and stolen his business. It was not for the faint-hearted. It took a dozen people to separate them. It seemed like everyone wanted to send their opponent to another world at that moment. I've thought of that too. There's a sedative in the only water bottle. So most likely, Dean won't wake up until the end of the event. And if that happens, he won't be in the mood for a fight. He'll probably just want to get home. Phoebe joyfully laughed, delighted that the audacious and faithful husband finally got what he deserved. Phoebe wasn't very lucky in her personal life. Both of her ex-husbands left her. To be fair, there were reasons. In their time, she and Vanessa loved to go to nightclubs without their spouses and get quite drunk. But memories of their own sins vanish without a trace, while others leave sharp notches in the brain. So now Phoebe was 100% sure that all men deserved any manifestations of female cunning. Great. Then I'll talk to this lady. Thank you, Phoebe. You're like a sister to me. At the mention of a sister, Vanessa darkened. Phoebe was the only real family she had. It all turned out stupid back then. And where is her wayward and unlucky older sister now? Well, now is not the time for that. It's time to give Dean a taste of his own medicine. Maybe it will make him think twice before getting involved with her and causing harm to Caleb. Phoebe, can we swap dresses? It looks silly when two tall blondes are dressed too similarly while sorting out relationships. She asked her friend. Yes, but you're much taller than me, and I'll have to shorten your outfit, replied Phoebe. Phoebe was up for any adventure. It truly lightened her soul when she could play a prank on some self-absorbed idiot. A dress was no big deal for her. Don't worry, I have scissors in my purse, Vanessa said. We'll trim it in a way that looks like a designer outfit. All white. Then I'll borrow your red lipstick. I did my makeup for a green dress. The friend agreed easily. Laughing, they went to the restroom. Soon, Phoebe emerged in a knee-length red dress, entirely concealing any hint of a side slit. She styled her hair into a sleek hairdo and applied perfectly red lipstick. She transformed from a mischievous curly girl into a stern and petite lady. When Phoebe saw her friend in the light, an involuntary deep sigh escaped her. The green dress clearly suited her friend better. Vanessa's knee-length dress turned into a mini, perfectly emphasizing her green eyes. Vanessa let her magnificent hair flow freely over her exposed, luxurious shoulders. Only the dress seemed a bit tight around her chest. It looked like her bust was eager to break free from the confines of the open green dress. On anyone else, it might have appeared provocative and vulgar. But Vanessa now resembled a runway model. You are simply enchanting. I almost feel sorry that Dean won't see you. Well, we'll make up for it now, Phoebe exclaimed. Phoebe immediately forgot about female envy and rushed to find a photographer. Kurt, make sure Vanessa, the hostess of the evening, gets into your magazine in the best possible shots. If she lands on the cover, I'll match the amount. She handed a couple of substantial bills to the photographer. No problem. If you double the amount, I can even talk to the TV folks. Get Vanessa a small interview, and I'll ensure the camera angles are the most effective. I studied with the cameraman back in school, the photographer said. Then he deliberately admired the beauty of both women. Okay, stop flattering. If you can arrange the television part, you'll get more, Phoebe promised him, handing him another bill. Kurt's face became slightly displeased, but he understood that compliments and admiration wouldn't get him anywhere with Phoebe. So he proceeded to fulfill his promise. Meanwhile, Vanessa approached her rival, whom, as she heard, her husband called Marta. She wandered through the hall, looking for Dean. Not knowing what to do now, she tried calling him, but it was pointless. Phoebe had thought of that too. She put Dean's phone on silent and tucked it under the sofa. No complaints. He was just not in the best shape and kept bumping into things. Are you Marta, I presume? The one who came here with Dean? Vanessa asked. pretending not to know. Yes, and you're the ex of my future, she sneered, envyingly eyeing Vanessa's long legs and slender figure. Then she added, "You've preserved well for your age, thank you. I don't know how I would live without your valuable opinion. But let's get to the main point. Do you want to snatch my husband permanently? If yes, let's talk where there's not too much press." Vanessa pointed towards the distant negotiation room. "Meaning your husband. I'm aware you've been divorced for a long time. If it weren't for Dean, your teenage son would have ended up in an orphanage. All you care about is men and parties, you old hag," Marta said. "So, are we going to talk or not?" Vanessa asked with satisfaction, noticing that her rival unwisely chose high heels. Yes, Marta was younger by 10 years and dressed in red, but all male eyes were on Vanessa. Who would doubt it? When they found themselves alone in the meeting room, Marta seemed like she was summoned to the principal's office. "So, dear, do you need Dean? Do you love him?" Vanessa asked directly. If she was lucky, she wouldn't have to follow Phoebe's advice, hiring someone, spending time and money. It would be easier to recruit one of the blondes who already had access to him. "And are you really still married?" Marta tried to portray herself as a bold mistress, but still looked rather pathetic. "Yes, but it's a formality. Since our son was born, we rarely have any intimate relations. Well, except occasionally and accidentally. After all, we still live in the same apartment. Anything can happen." Vanessa assumed the role of the scornful wife, well aware of her rights. She could let go of her unnecessary husband only on her terms and whenever she pleased. "If Marta knew how much I dream of finally foisting this Dean onto someone with a bonus. Life goes on. Youth is not eternal," Vanessa thought. Marta sank even further into her chair. "How will you prove it?" she asked grimly. Vanessa handed her recent selfies with Dean, clearly portraying them as an almost perfect family with Caleb. "If that's not enough, just drop by." "Need the address?" Vanessa asked. "No need. I know. I've followed him a couple of times. Saw you too. But I thought it was some regular meeting with an ex," Marta said. Marta understood that arguing with this lady was not a good idea. "So, do you need him? Do you love him? Because I know my man. He won't be supporting anyone. And he's, how should I put it delicately, quite polygamous," Marta added. Vanessa needed an ally who knew what she was getting into and wouldn't back out later. She had no intention of wasting time on others. "As for mistresses, besides me, I know about them." He didn't hide it, but I thought everything would change when we got married. "And even if he's not generous, at least he won't take anything away from me. I have a place to live. I can even take him to my place if he bothers you," Vanessa said. Marta quickly grasped the essence of the matter. This lady clearly wanted to get rid of Dean. Well, this was her chance. Why not make a deal if their goals were mutual? "So, you love him?" Vanessa's heart suddenly skipped a beat. She remembered herself when she met her husband. He seemed like a prince back then. Vanessa believed he would replace the father she never had and love her like the mother who perpetually drank and handed her over to her aunt. Although she loved Phoebe, her aunt's daughter, and they were friends, Vanessa still wanted to find her own family, exclusively hers. As for her older sister Molly, luck was even less on her side. Their mother had given her away to an orphanage. They saw each other at most once every 6 months. Vanessa was so young then that she barely remembered anything. Eventually, Molly did show up, but that scoundrel Dean ruined everything. He didn't become a close and sole figure, taking her sister away, so let him get what he deserves. She couldn't endure this emotional torture and disappointment any longer. Let her husband understand as well that people are alive, and they shouldn't be tormented just on a whim. "So, are you giving him to me?" Marta's words sounded surprisingly naive, considering her red dress, grandiose makeup, and solemn high hairstyle. "Yes, but I have conditions," Vanessa smiled. She couldn't afford to break down now. She needed to complete the recruitment process and start receiving valuable answers to important questions. In return, she would give away someone who had become so annoying that she felt like howling. As for Dean, he woke up very late, after the event had ended. The kind security guard told him, "Oh, you're awake. Well, that's good. We need to clear the venue by morning." How much time? Dean was surprised. He struggled to remember what had happened. It's already past midnight. "Let me drive you." "Did you come by car?" Fred asked. "Yeah." Dean nodded. "In your current state, you definitely shouldn't drive. I'll take you." "It's not that easy to earn the money after all," Fred said. The responsible security guard was glad to get rid of the assigned individual and finally return home. His wife had called several times. "Well, nothing. He could wait a bit. I'm looking for my phone. Can't find it, buddy," complained the client. The guard searched through the pillows, sofas, and chairs. Then he moved the furniture and found the mobile phone very quickly. "Looks like it fell," Fred politely said. Both men were getting ready to leave when Dean found his car. He initially wanted to drive alone, but the guard insisted again that it's not worth getting behind the wheel in such a state. "In what state?" "I only had a glass at the presentation," he stubbornly said. "Anything can happen, and one glass can do the trick, especially if there was something else before." The guard slyly winked at him. "Okay, then let's go to this address." Dean provided the address of his mistress, but not Rita. He has no intention of calming down that nag. He had already seen a bunch of messages and missed calls on his phone. The content varied from "I hate you" to "I'll take you anytime." The most banal and predictable lady. What else can be added? It's not even interesting to argue with her. She'll calm down on her own. He's not going to explain anything to her. With Marta, everything was clear. She fell in love. She sees him as the father of her children, and all that. Well, let her fight. Who is stopping him from playing the imaginary prince? Women invent the hero image themselves and then get upset. No, he's not going to play these games and justify himself to her. Who is she anyway? Just another blonde. Plenty of them. "Are you sure you need to go to this address?" the guard suddenly asked. "Well, of course. What? Do I look like someone who doesn't know where to go?" He frowned. "Phoebe, well, your wife's friend, gave a different address. It seems like your wife wanted you to go home." Fred himself understood that his advice was inappropriate. In front of him was an adult man, albeit a bit slow. Let him decide where to go. But he didn't want to argue with the employer either. "Phoebe, so they set something up with my wife. Lured me into an empty room. And after drinking water, I blacked out." He suddenly began to remember. "I apologize, but that's not my concern. So I won't comment on it. I've been instructed to take you to a safe place. So just tell me where to go." After all, the guard tried to maintain a calm and steady tone. He didn't need problems. Fred just wanted to finish his assignment calmly and bring money to his family. "All right. Let's go to my wife, or else you might report on me to that crazy Vanessa," Dean said. "As you say." Fred was glad that there wouldn't be any problems, and he calmly drove Dean home. "I'll let them deal with their own problems. I'm not doing anything wrong. I earn money honestly. So, that's it for today," he thought. Fred noticed that Dean turned the corner and didn't enter the entrance. After a while, a taxi pulled up to him. Just in case, Fred decided to follow him. Fortunately, the address was nearby. A woman in her 50s, wearing a tracksuit, greeted Dean at that address. Everything seemed fine with him. Fred didn't need to know more. He didn't write a report to Phoebe about it. After all, she didn't ask him to. Besides, there's an unspoken male solidarity. He wasn't a snitch. Who knows what happens in relationships between people? It's none of his business. Dean didn't go home that weekend. He stayed over at Rita's place. She was thrilled about it. The first sleepover. She clearly already had dreams of a wedding dress. Dean even felt a little sorry for her. Among all his mistresses, he treated Rita the best. His feelings for her most closely resembled what he felt for his wife. And that surprised him because Rita had nothing in common with his wife photographer, neither in appearance nor in speech, nor in views on life. For example, Marta, the youngest of his blondes, looks much more like his wife in her youth. But he doesn't feel anything for her. What to think about this? Better to ask a psychologist. After all, he pays him money for something. What else to expect? He scheduled an appointment on the same day. Luckily, Mr. Branson had a free hour. It's interesting, Doc. All my mistresses resemble my wife and mother. But my gym teacher Rita doesn't fit into the scheme. Why do I feel that she is closest to the image of my wife? Dean asked his psychologist, whom he had been seeing for about 10 years. It didn't particularly help, and Mr. Branson charged a hefty fee. But at least Dean could talk to him about what bothered him and not feel any guilt. Well, it may not sound very professional, but is that all that bothers you? Aren't the love dependence on your wife, hatred for your brother, and enormous debts more important to you? The slender old man asked, adjusting his glasses. At first, Mr. Branson even considered Dean a psychopath and was about to refuse to work with him. However, he realized that Dean was not a predator but someone who had lost control. The patient was just a person with a borderline personality disorder, perhaps a bit narcissistic, but overall, there was a chance to help this person. Mr. Branson became convinced of this when Dean shared that he secretly placed a large order with his brother, prepaid 100% through a dummy, and then asked not to fulfill the work and not to return the money. It was Dean's way of returning at least a part of the money he had stolen from Chad. Besides, he didn't hate his brother that much. Rather, he wildly envied his mother, who had long passed away. Again, everyone knows that the wife gave birth to a child not from him. He read it himself in her diary, which Vanessa kept in a supposedly secure hiding place, that she did it on purpose. And his mother heartlessly threw Dean's medical test results in his face when he was young, showing that he couldn't have children. But he loves Caleb. Maybe not as he would love his own, but he takes care of him with all his might. As for mistresses, the client is certainly behaving improperly, but at least he honestly warns that he will never provide financial support or get married. So, they know what they're getting into. In the end, it's definitely not the worst misdeed he has heard of during his long practice. I wonder why he hid from his wife that her teenage son turned to alcohol and bad company not because of him. It happened earlier, and the father, on the contrary, did everything to rescue him from the huge problems that could have befallen Caleb. Why does he keep portraying himself as a monster all the time? Will she ever be able to love him or at least forgive him? Pondered the elderly psychologist. And then, the patient provided an answer to the previously asked question. Doc, you see, the whole tangle of problems is important, but I feel that Rita is the thread that can lead me out of this maze. Can you help me with something? Well, you have a lot of experience. Suppose, why do I sincerely feel drawn to her? He asked, almost plaintively. It's hard to say. Maybe you've met her or someone similar before, and she meant something to you, saved your life or something like that. The psychologist speculated. Well, Rita is straightforward. If we had ever crossed paths before, I would have recognized her, and she wouldn't have hesitated to tell me about it. As for a similar woman, unfortunately, I can't remember anything like that. Let's get back to the question of why you persistently portray yourself as a bad person in front of your wife and brother. The psychologist attempted to return him to what he considered more important questions. I'm not ready to talk about it yet, but someday I'll get to it, Dean promised. The remaining time of the session was spent chatting about trivial things, his hobbies, life plans, and various miscellaneous topics. Mr. Branson served as a substitute father for him, whom he had never known. So these conversations were necessary for Dean. He felt that this psychologist at least wished him well and positive changes. This elderly man knew much more about him than others, but Dean didn't hate him. Step by step, he taught Dean to love his real self, not the invented one. It was very valuable. Dean realized for the first time that he wasn't a complete scoundrel and monster, as his mother, wife, and brother believed when he started coming to this already familiar office. Dean came here for tiny justifications that gradually cleansed his image from dirt. It gave him the strength to live. Yes, progress was slow. Only after a few years did he understand that he didn't want to steal from his brother. He was just very scared. And the fact that he felt ashamed and tried to rectify the situation also proved that maybe he could mend his relationship with his brother. And he truly loves Vanessa, genuinely. He forgave her for things that hardly any other man would forgive. Infidelity, and another person's child in the house. Moreover, he managed to love the son, even though he was his own by blood. Despite everyone saying that Caleb resembles his wife, Dean sees traits of his brother in him. And this is his chance to raise the next Chad into a decent person. So, he picks him up from school every time to ensure he doesn't get involved with a bad crowd again. But it's not just because of his son that he doesn't let his wife go. He simply can't live without her, can't breed. Everything will collapse. Dean tries, really tries to find other reasons to keep on living. He attempts to start his own life and looks for other supports. But he firmly knows that as long as Vanessa is not there, there will be nothing. Everything will crumble, and there's something else he needs to protect his wife from. He won't even tell Mr. Branson about it. Walls might have ears, and this secret is something only Dean can bear. Only Dean can shield Vanessa from this danger. Vanessa, has your husband still not shown up at home? Phoebe asked her friend. No, but he sent a message saying he'd be back on Monday. As usual, he'll take Caleb to school, Vanessa replied. She herself was surprised that her husband gave her the opportunity to have a complete break from him for 2 days. She didn't know whether to be glad for this respite or fear something, but the security guard reported that he delivered him home. Her friend continued to marvel. Although, to which home? There are so many at my Dean's. He has a big heart, Vanessa sarcastically remarked. Okay, we'll figure it out later. I've already bought a magazine with your photos. Look at this queen. You're even on the cover, Phoebe said, showing her friend a dazzling socialite in a green mini dress, overshadowing all the surrounding ladies. Vanessa couldn't help but admire herself. Yes, not bad at all. It's not too late. I'm still beautiful, she thought with a sigh. Then they drank tea and looked at the photos Kirk took at the event. Vanessa particularly liked a photo where she was talking to Marta, who appeared hunched and insecure. Unlike Vanessa, who radiated feminine magnetism and the allure of a woman who knows the power of capturing hearts. I'll print these two and casually leave them in Dean's office, Vanessa said, pointing to the photos that emphasized her undeniable advantages over her husband's foolish lover. And don't forget the magazine. Even if he can't get you, at least he'll have something to remember when he faces miserable old age with one of his fools. Phoebe was still in a state of excitement about how everything turned out so well. It remained only to remind her friend of the idea to introduce Dean to a lover who would find out everything about him. Phoebe didn't mind the effort. She called acting agencies and found a suitable candidate. All she needed was money, and she didn't ask unnecessary questions. She fit perfectly. So, what did you decide, friend? Are we going to send a spy into the enemy camp? Phoebe asked. And this part is already settled. I made a deal with Marta. Vanessa suddenly smiled cunningly. And what? Did she take the money? She seems to be from a well-off family. Phoebe wondered. Money doesn't interest her, but I promised to introduce her to the man of her dreams after she gets a job with my husband and finds out all the details about his finances. Vanessa detailed her business conversation with Marta. Well, you're something else, my friend. Quiet, and then bam. You've outdone even me in quick thinking and cunning," admired Phoebe. "Yeah, I'm full of secrets, and I can't say it makes me happy," sighed Vanessa. She spoke the absolute truth, and suddenly, it became very, very sad. Lunchtime arrived, and Caleb, who had been playing computer games all night, woke up. At least, he had stopped hanging out with a bad crowd and drinking. Vanessa shuddered, recalling how she almost lost him last summer. She felt guilty towards her son. Some children are born out of love, and her son was born out of revenge. "Mom, where's Dad? Isn't he joining us for breakfast?" asked her son. "Well, it's actually lunchtime. I would even say it's late. Have you looked at the clock?" She gently reproached him. She lacked the strength to be truly strict with her teenage son. It must be admitted that, in all cases except for the past years when she wanted to leave her husband, Dean had a positive influence on Caleb. "It's also complicated. But why did I ruin my life? I should have just left Dean back then," she thought, and remembered the unfortunate incident that led her to the final decision to seek revenge. "Did you two have a fight with Dad? Aunt Phoebe, did they fight?" Her son persisted. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes adults need a break from each other. Look at how cool your mom looks in the photos." Phoebe handed Caleb a magazine with Vanessa on the cover. "Wow, cool." The plan worked, and the teenager switched his attention. Later, he reluctantly sent his father a couple of messages, then calmed down, ate lazily, and went to play on the computer. "If Mata's plan doesn't work, I'll have to repair the relationship with Caleb's father. I'll tell him I'm madly in love. Men love that. I understand that he won't leave his beloved wife for me, but at least he might agree to help me break free from Dean." Suddenly, Vanessa felt the hatred for her husband resurface. When she saw her son, she remembered that last summer his father almost ruined him, all because of her silly revenge. It was time to end these meaningless relationships. She was still young and beautiful, and there was still time to achieve something. Besides, her son needed to be safe. Of course, it would be difficult for him to part with the father he considered his own. But she would think of something. "Vanessa, did you thank Shad for sponsoring the exhibition? A lot of money was invested, and there's absolutely no profit. He didn't even bother with advertising. I asked him. I think he did it just for you," slyly winked her friend. Phoebe saw a romantic undertone in everything and, at the same time, considered men to be the cause of all troubles. A strange combination. "Today, I'll go to him. He works on Sundays, just like every day. I've already arranged it," Vanessa said. She genuinely intended to gather information if she had to interact with Caleb's biological father and team up against Dean. "Well, it's time. You look great." Phoebe supported her. She promised to stay with Caleb until her friend returned. Since the teenager became uncontrollable last year, he had sobered up and hadn't done anything similar since. However, adults kept an eye on him just in case and protected his peace. Moreover, Phoebe had no children of her own and loved Caleb as if he were her own, so she was always willing to stay with him. After all, Vanessa and Phoebe had grown up together since childhood. "Chad, I've been wanting to ask you for a long time. Why are you giving me money for a large photo exhibition for the second time, and it brings no profit?" Vanessa was keenly observing the man whom her husband considered his enemy. Does he really remember anything about that night? But even if he does, he has a beloved wife. Besides, Caleb, his blood son, doesn't resemble him. And Dean, despite all his efforts, can't tell him anything. He doesn't even know, she thought. Chad appeared out of nowhere. She hadn't seen him since that very night that eventually gave her a son. Initially, Vanessa thought it was about some financial disputes with her husband, which might still be ongoing without her knowledge. But Chad didn't say a word about it. "Oh, Vanessa, this story has deep roots. To some extent, it's my act of reconciliation with an old partner. I can't find the strength to talk to Dean directly. So, I decided to do something good for his beloved woman, said the phlegmatic, slightly overweight blonde. His eyes barely blinked, and his good-natured tone didn't match the tense posture and wary expression on his face. Well, you're exaggerating about the beloved woman part. I'm just a boring wife. My husband has had women who excite him much more for a long time, Vanessa candidly revealed. She had to find out what had happened between her husband and his partner, and why they hated each other so much. She came to him, supposedly casually, to give her poster as a gift and express gratitude. In reality, she needed to understand if she could turn to this person in case of need and use him in the fight against her husband. Besides, she was simply curious to learn more about the father of her child. Caleb was growing up, and, whether she liked it or not, half of his genes came from this Chad. So, it was worth learning more about him. Dean and I had a period when we trusted each other. Chad suddenly stuttered, coughed, and then added after a minute's pause. Or rather, there was a time when I trusted him, and it seemed to me that he also felt positively. So, your husband confessed to me once that you are the main woman in his life, but remain inaccessible to him. And he suffers a lot because of it. Suffering. Don't make me laugh, Chad. I appreciate your attempt to boost my fragile ego, and I even concede that Dean might have said something like that to you. But believe me, I'm just a familiar part of his interior decor, Vanessa said. She felt awkward as tears of anger welled up in her eyes. For years, she had been trying to become indifferent to her husband, but she still couldn't help herself. Was there really no off button anywhere? She already had every reason to hate Dean. Believe me, sentimentality is not my thing. Besides, I know your husband quite well. We've known each other since childhood. So, I can assure you that I can distinguish his genuine emotions amid all the garbage in his head, Chad said seriously. So, you were friends, studied together, lived nearby. Vanessa's husband never told her anything about his family. She didn't know where he grew up or who his parents were. So, all this was extremely interesting to her. Although she convinced herself that she just wanted to study better the man who had become her enemy and was interfering with her life. But even she understood that she still wanted to get to know this person better, simply because feelings remained. Oh, it's a long and dull story. You shouldn't waste your time listening to it. A fascinating woman like you surely has other things to do, he said, signaling that it was time for her to leave. There was some hidden hardness in this man, and perhaps even cruelty. Vanessa couldn't explain it to herself, but somehow she understood that playing games with this person was not a good idea. Well, it's a good thing I didn't tell him anything about Caleb, she thought with satisfaction as she began to put on her coat. What did Dean tell you about the reason for our breakup? Chad suddenly asked. That you deceived him, Vanessa answered, surprising herself. If she had had time to think, she would never have answered like that. So, I left him with nothing, sighed Dean's former partner. But in that sigh, Vanessa heard not only disappointment but also profound satisfaction. As if he hadn't even been upset, but just finally convinced himself of what he had suspected. Yeah, I apologize. I've said too much. It's none of my business. Vanessa began to justify herself, although such a habit was not typical for her. But suddenly, she really felt the breath of danger. Oh, dear, you are not involved in this. These are our affairs with your husband. You won't believe it, but I actually treated him fairly back then. But well, that's between us now. Feel free to reach out anytime. Dear, you caught my eye 13 years ago, and I've never forgotten you, he said. Her recent words left Vanessa stunned. So, he does remember that I seduced him. But he was dead drunk, like everyone back then. This can't be true. Vanessa once again studied Chad's unremarkable features, but they revealed nothing special. She hesitated to inquire about what he meant by liked me 13 years ago. Was he suspicious and trying to find out, or was it just a random remark? Memories of those Christmas holidays flashed before her eyes. At that time, she only knew Chad as Dean's enemy. She despised her husband then, as he had been trying to break her heart since they got married. If not for his betrayal, Vanessa would have let him go amicably. But then, something happened that she couldn't forgive. Dean seduced her own sister, with whom they had just reconciled. Molly had left home long ago at the age of 18 years Vanessa's senior. Vanessa was overjoyed that her sister was alive and well. Despite Dean describing Molly as ugly and fat, it didn't stop him from making them hate each other. If Molly appeared now, Vanessa would embrace her. Yet, Dean, the scoundrel, wasn't worth a single tear from either of them. But Molly never reappeared. She simply vanished. Even the detective couldn't find any information about her. This was the last straw for Vanessa's patience. Pretending to be heavily drunk, she entered Chad's bedroom. Vanessa was well aware that an enemy of her husband, even one who deeply loved his wife, might refuse her. So she said something like, "Oh, it's so noisy everywhere. And it's so nice and quiet here. Can I sleep here?" "Why not, madam?" Chad gallantly invited the naked lady under the covers. The rest was straightforward. She poured another glass, sipped for appearances, and said, "Dean doesn't understand or appreciate me." Then Chad forcefully pulled her close and said seriously, "He doesn't me too." From then on, all they had left was to seek revenge. Revenge. And more revenge. When Chad fell asleep, Vanessa quietly slipped out of his bed and returned to her room. Throughout the next day, she listened to Dean's complaints about why his business partners invited his enemy. They knew he couldn't stand him. Vanessa nodded and expressed outrage for show. The next day, Chad's wife arrived, delayed by her sick mother. They never spoke privately again. So even if he remembered something, he couldn't be sure that she remembered anything too. Moreover, he couldn't know that the night had brought a consequence that had now grown into a teenage boy. On Christmas night, "I was so drunk, but I don't remember anything at all," she repeated throughout the remaining holidays. So if he vaguely remembers something, she made it clear that she's not intending to talk about it. But he didn't attempt to have any private conversation with her. "Vanessa, are you feeling unwell? Should I call a taxi for you? Escort you?" She suddenly realized that she was holding onto the door frame and still hadn't left. As she wandered in memories of that night, the biological father of her child supported her elbow. She didn't even feel his touch. Something was wrong with her. Perhaps she needed to see a doctor. She wasn't old yet, and suddenly such lapses in the past. What would happen next? "No, Chad, everything is fine. Just had a lot of coffee in the morning." She hurried to reassure him. "I love coffee in the morning too, but not all ladies make it to the morning." Chad suddenly winked at her. He's hinting at something. That night he mentioned making excellent coffee and asked her to stay into the morning. But she escaped. She didn't need Chad. Vanessa just wanted, at the very least, to sleep with her husband's enemy, and at most, to get pregnant by him and make Dean raise not just another man's child, but the son of the one he despised. Vanessa didn't respond to him, but once again caught herself on the danger signal her body was giving. Her hands were numb and cold. Her brain worked slowly, like an overloaded processor. She barely made it out of Chad's office, and when she was outside, she took a deep breath of fresh air. "I feel like a bird that escaped a stray cat," Vanessa thought, and once again, she promised herself that she would try not to interact with Chad unless absolutely necessary. Suddenly, she felt an unpleasant tingling in the back of her head. This usually happened when someone was staring at her from behind. She turned around and saw on the second floor how Chad's face almost instantly disappeared behind the blinds. It made her uncomfortable. Somehow, Vanessa thought that this person could cause her more suffering than her husband. Chad noticed that Vanessa managed to see him in the window and caught himself thinking that there really was some invisible connection between them that night. No, he didn't love her, but he still hated Dean, And he also wanted to take everything dear from his brother. It's great that his wife thinks we're just business partners. He thought, satisfied, and snapped his fingers. Such a snap meant that Chad was satisfied with how things were developing. If she knew that Dean was his biological brother, she would have to explain too much. And he didn't want that. For example, he would have to say that he knew about Caleb being his son. Dean just couldn't have children, although he probably didn't know about it. Chad knew this because their mother was a very practical and cynical person. Once, when he was just over 20, his mother told him, "Chad, I don't just work as the chief physician for nothing. I did tests for both you and Dean. He won't be able to have children. So, I'll give you the apartment. What are you staring at? I have cancer. I won't live long. It's time for you to get married. Maybe I'll see some grandchildren," concluded his mother. Chad didn't particularly like his older brother, but he still felt sorry that Dean would end up essentially homeless. After all, Dean was even a better son than Chad himself. He helped their mother in everything and loved her even more than Chad did. So he found the strength to say to his mother, "But the tests could be inaccurate." "Fool. I did them several times. Do you think your mother is a fool?" "No, I'm the only smart one here. I hope at least one of my grandchildren will take after me," she concluded. Chad was 2 years older than Dean and felt a sense of responsibility as the older brother. He decided that he wouldn't argue with his mother, but he wouldn't abandon Dean either. However, for some reason, Dean thought that Chad had convinced their mother to make the decision in his favor and stop talking to him. That's when their mother started attacking, urging him to get married. "Chad, it's time to become worthy, to rise above yourself," his mother would say, and this meant that the test results disappointed her. It only got worse after numerous radiation treatments. Dean considered him a traitor. His mother forced him to get married, actively inviting an annoying young woman from the neighborhood for visits. Apparently, she thought that if she was around, Chad wouldn't go anywhere. This gave him the opportunity to focus on programming. He started earning well, worked remotely, and the time was simply blissful. He would come home, cook spaghetti, enjoy his favorite coffee, lie on the couch for an hour, didn't spend much, bought groceries and clothes at economy stores. So money accumulated fairly quickly. He even opened a small company that dealt with developing applications and chatbots. Initially, he worked alone, but then he expanded the business as profits grew. Somehow, on a fun dating site, he met a female programmer who became his beloved wife. Though later, she switched to working in a hair salon as her eyesight started to deteriorate. But it didn't matter. The main thing was that he found love. Now he was happy and tried to communicate less with his mother and brother. He hoped they would reconcile, but it didn't work out. In the end, it all went according to his mother's plan. He and his wife had 2 granddaughters. His mother lived for another 6 months and then passed away. She bequeathed the apartment to Chad. Despite his attempts to reconcile with Dean and offer him a share from the beginning, Dean only hated him more. "What? Set up mother against me and quickly got married. And now you want to throw me a bone? It won't work," his brother said. But after a few years, he returned and took that half of the money for the apartment that Chad had offered him from the very beginning. Not only did he take it, but he also suggested working together. Chad wide well on the past. "Heard you're doing well. Let's work together," Dean offered. Sure, he sincerely hugged his brother. However, the collaboration lasted only a year. Dean drained all the money from the company, took away employees, lured major clients, and publicly humiliated Chad. He portrayed it as if he had founded the company, and Chad had betrayed him. It was only then that Chad realized his brother had hated him from the start and wanted revenge. Bold Dean bankrupted their company, refusing to pay anyone, neither employees nor clients. There was no time to grieve. Chad started from scratch. already in a related field. Only his love for his wife and daughters helped him quickly get back on his feet. He became even wealthier. Money flowed to him effortlessly. Although he didn't actively seek wealth, it literally chased after him. It turned out well that Dean's wife came to him on her own. It was also good that at least Chad's money went towards supporting his own child. Otherwise, it would have been harder to forgive his brother for taking everything away. However, even this was not enough. Chad devised a whole strategy that would gradually ruin his brother's life. Dean's wife was part of this intriguing plan. It's great that she's afraid of him. Time will come, and she'll come willingly. If only she knew that Marta has long been sent by us. A blonde, very loyal to Chad. Of course, for a considerable sum. She brilliantly plays the role of a foolish lover. Just yesterday evening, Marta reported that Dean's wife instructed her to get a job with her husband and find out everything about the finances. So, it was a simple matter. We just need to forge documents so that Vanessa thinks Dean is bankrupt. He's taken numerous loans and plans to hang them on him to seek revenge. Chad explained. Chad didn't actually count on such luck. He didn't expect Vanessa to willingly fall into the trap and send Marta behind enemy lines. But luck was on his side. Therefore, seizing the opportunity was essential. Finally, the world was bending in Chad's favor, and it would be foolish to refuse such good fortune. It was time to seize the moment. The next day, everything seemed to return to normal. Dean, as if nothing had happened, appeared at home. He began playing the role of a model husband and father, taking his son to school and picking him up. In the evening, he spent time with his wife over dinner, cheerfully chatting about trivial matters. He seemed carefree. If someone saw their family from the outside, they might have even envied the seemingly idyllic life. However, each spouse felt that all was not well. When the father went to bed, the son unexpectedly entered the room quietly, without knocking. What happened, Caleb? Vanessa was initially scared. Her son usually knocked. Mom, SHH. I need to talk to you very quietly. We don't want Dad to hear us, Caleb said. All right, she replied in a whisper. Today, our gym teacher, Rita, called me to her and asked to give this to you. The boy handed her an envelope, but she asked to give it to you in a way that Dad wouldn't find out. But we don't even know her. I've only seen her briefly once, Vanessa said, surprised. But Dad knows her very well, Caleb replied, folding a heart with his fingers. His mother realized that Caleb had long ceased to be a child and understood much more than she had previously thought. Okay, go to sleep, and I'll see what's in there, she told him. Mom, there's something else you should know. I'm not little anymore. I know that you and Dad hate each other, even though you pretend otherwise. If anything happens, I'll be on your side. I won't abandon you. But you should also know that Dad isn't as bad as you think. He cares about you and me in his own way. Caleb initially wanted to share that his father had rescued him from danger that time, even without informing his mother. But he decided it wasn't the right moment. Revealing too much to his mother could be overwhelming. According to his father, women, his father claimed, were very sensitive and might go crazy if burdened with too much at once. Despite their continuing normal activities, they would behave as if insane in the most crucial matters. According to his father, women were oblivious to this. Some even considered themselves stronger and smarter than men. However, the secret was that men took precautions and didn't take on anything beyond the norm without extreme necessity, making them seem weak. Women, on the other hand, took on everything, then lived as if insane but convinced themselves they were normal. So, he didn't delve into the topic further and didn't even demand his mother read the letter from the gym teacher, although he was incredibly curious about its contents. His father emphasized the importance of respecting other secrets, but his father claimed that one should respect other secrets. Although Dean himself constantly hacked into Vanessa's computer and read her hidden diary, Caleb still tried to adhere to this important rule for a man. to keep other secrets. Parents have complicated relationships. Maybe dad just wants to protect mom. That's what he thought, and he never told his father that he saw him trying to find out everything about his mom. Nor did he tell his mother that his father was doing so. They're constantly arguing anyway. Why make it worse? Caleb thought. With these thoughts, Caleb returned to his room and resumed his battle in some silly computer game, which provided a slight distraction from reality. There, he could be a hero and save the world from evil. When Vanessa opened the letter and read the text, circles swam before her eyes. Hello, dear sister. I haven't dared to write to you all this time. I'll say straight away that what caused our quarrel is ongoing. I have become your husband's lover again. But this time, for your sake. A lot has happened. I changed my name. Now I am not Marta, but Rita. I lost weight and had a facelift. Completely changed my image. I wear contact lenses now. I take care of myself. I graduated from a physical education college. I've recovered from the destructive addiction. My nephew is growing into a good person. I have a lot to tell you. But the main thing is this. I love you and ask not to trust Marta. I am sure that Chad hired her. Let's meet tomorrow at your photo studio at 11 a.m. Forgive me, I've been watching you, and I know that you're almost always there at that time. Just listen to your heart and try to believe me. Just in case, here's another phone that no one knows about. Your dear sister. Vanessa covered her face with her hands and burst into tears. Gradually, crying turned into sobbing. So she had to bury her face in the pillow so that neither her husband nor her son could hear. In front of her eyes appeared her dear sister as she last saw her. Plump, sloppy, awkward, with thick-lensed glasses, but so familiar. Her sister had a hard time. She was more than 10 years older than her. So all the quirks of their overly dependent mother and childhood in an orphanage fell on the older sister. Then, before the fateful holidays when she conceived Caleb from her husband's enemy, she avenged him for having cynically slept with her sister. Then she suddenly realized that he didn't love her, didn't respect her as a person, and that would never change. If not for that incident, she could have just left and started a new life. But the betrayal of two close people changed everything. She stayed with her husband and decided to avenge him. She started affairs with increasingly younger admirers. Haha, even her cousin Phoebe thinks she's just a high-level doormat. But Dean knows very well that she has long outdone him in the number of second halves. Vanessa was determined, and if she decided to ruin her husband's life, she hit him where it hurt the most. Male ego was still a thing. So let him have it. Vanessa knew he regularly hacked into her computer and phone, so she constantly fed him materials. Let him enjoy. Actually, her libido died right after childbirth. She gave birth to Caleb, and it seemed like she fulfilled her purpose once and for all. The last time she felt passion was with her husband's enemy. But, of course, it wasn't Chad's love-making skills that stirred Vanessa. It was the thrill of revenge and her own audacity. After that, she never felt the same way again. Not that the desire disappeared completely, but it became so background that even her love for sweets could be considered a much stronger passion. So, calling Vanessa a debauched woman was out of the question. Everything for revenge, everything for her husband. And only now, suddenly, after her sister showed up, Vanessa felt for the first time that everything she had done was foolishness, madness, obsession. How tired she was of all this. This is not her life at all. She didn't need it. She made an idol out of Dean and then decided to tear her husband from her heart. And instead of a mountain, she found herself in the Marianas Trench. But he still occupied the main place in her life. Nothing worked out. Nothing in life worked out. All deception. All a sham. She scratched her face with her nails. She howled almost soundlessly, like a fatally wounded beast in a trap. Her husband sensed something. He knocked on the door. Vanessa, are you okay? Yes. just decided to celebrate the success of the exhibition a little more and got carried away. She heard her icy and calm voice. "If anything, I'm here." Dean hadn't spoken to her with such a loving voice for a long time. She took off her robe, crumpled it into a ball, buried her face in it. He will never know how much suffering he caused her. No, her tormentor won't get that pleasure. As soon as she heard his retreating steps, she immediately turned on the table lamp, looked at herself in the mirror. A wild, disheveled, sharply aged woman stared back at her. Green eyes burned with some unpleasant light. There was something frightening and even infernal in them. Cheeks were scratched. Wrinkles suddenly appeared on her forehead, which she had never noticed before. To top it all off, a couple of gray hairs appeared in her eyebrows from somewhere. Of course, she's a blonde, and no one will notice. But she won't forget. Old age crept up on her too early, and it came not alone but together with the despair of a fruitless life. Maybe Caleb will be happy. For his sake, she has to somehow survive until he stands on his own feet. It's difficult. Every year seems endlessly difficult and agonizing. But that's for now. And when she finally gets rid of this monster, everything will be better, calmer, probably. There was no one to consult with. But there was no doubt that the note was from her own sister. She attached a sheet on which she wrote about incidents that only the two of them could know. It was almost morning, but she dialed the number specified in the note. The receiver was picked up, but silence lingered on the other end. Vanessa couldn't muster the courage to speak either. She wouldn't mistake her sister's voice for anything. "Vanessa, is that you? Forgive me, sister. I love you so much. I'll be there tomorrow at 11. Was all Vanessa could say. Before this note, she thought she loved her sister, wanted to find her. But when she found out that she was seeing her husband, confidence in that melted away. Is she with Dean for her sake? And who does her sister want to deceive? It sounds very funny. Sometimes she thought that you could only extract her husband from her chest along with her heart. In childhood, she loved reading not-so-feminine novels and remembered such a comparison. If a brave knight was stabbed in the chest with a sword, and if the sharp weapon penetrated deep, it couldn't be pulled out because life left the fighter along with it. Dean was that sharp sword, and she herself let him into her heart. She was foolish, what can you say? And she had everything to live a happy feminine life. Looks, brains, talent. She missed everything. Now, instead of a beautiful girl, she remained an old witch, whose blood only ignites from revenge on a man who never even loved her. Yes, it couldn't get any worse. Vanessa couldn't sleep until morning, lying with her eyes open. And only closer to 6 in the morning, she remembered that she needed to at least apply a mask so as not to look completely terrible. Today, I'll break up with everyone. I won't sleep with men for the sake of revenge on my husband. Enough for me. At least this piece of someone else's life, I'll take off myself. I don't want to be fatal. She decided for herself. Then she thought about Marta, her husband's mistress. Why does her sister say that she works for Chad? It seemed that this young woman looked very touchingly in love. Well, there were only a few hours left, and her sister would tell her everything. There was only time to sleep for a few hours. So Vanessa decided that there would be enough suffering for today. She set the alarm and disconnected. Just plunged into emptiness. Dawn broke. Dean couldn't sleep. He was worried that his wife's unhealthy addiction to alcohol had resurfaced. They had been through this period before. So when the movement in her room subsided, he took the key to her room, which he had secretly made a long time ago, and entered. No, she wasn't drinking. The bar was closed. He sniffed the glass just in case. Everything was fine. There was only water. He studied his wife's face. It was scratched. Tears in her eyes. Probably dumped another lover. He thought. His wife often wrote about such things in her diary. But there was never a word about him. It's disappointing. There's a place in a wife's heart for everyone but him. Suddenly, he noticed shreds of a letter. It was already light enough to put them together and read. He frowned. His wife groaned and turned to the other side. He quickly folded the letter back, but copied the phone number before. So, this is the mystery of my lover who is unlike all the others. The blood relation of my beloved wife. Memories of the past. The reply came quickly. Doc, very quickly. He sighed sadly. Then he took his wife's phone and installed a listening program. Dean rarely resorted to such measures before. Vanessa was far from stupid and could notice. But it was still necessary to learn more about his wife's life than she wanted to tell him. After all, he loves her in any case. And if she has completely spoiled herself, there is a large share of his guilt in that. Vanessa used to be different. She used to beg him not to go anywhere without her in the evenings. But he believed that the less he loves a woman, the more she will be attached to him. A mistake. The woman grew to hate him. And what to do with all this now? He's just a human, not some kind of angel. His patience is not limitless. Pull yourself together, fool. He mentally repeated the words of his mother, who never loved him either. Before, these sadistic phrases irritated him. But now, it's the only thing he has left from his mother. But I can still save Vanessa from herself. And by the way, what's going on with Marta? Does she really work for my brother? With these thoughts, he left his wife's room. Exactly at 11, Dean could hear such a conversation. Molly, what did you want to say? How do you know Marta can't be trusted? His wife asked the woman he recently considered Rita. It's a long story. The sister hesitated. I'm not in a hurry, Vanessa replied. In short, this Chad is not just some former partner of your husband. Moreover, he didn't even betray him. She began. Yes, he told me himself. But now I don't know who and what to believe anymore. Vanessa said. Vanessa, do you talk to him? He's a very dangerous person, believe me. His lover's voice sounded genuinely sincere. Involuntarily, Dean found himself wondering if this fake Rita truly loved him. He hoped his wife would ask about it, but the conversation revolved around his brother for now. Dean was aware that his wife had been with Chad. It wasn't news. Girls, let's move on to something more interesting. Like discussing me, he thought sarcastically. But they didn't hear him and continued on the same topic. Is it safe to communicate with you? You slept with my husband many years ago, then disappeared. And now it turns out you're his mistress. Why should I trust you? Give me at least one reason. Vanessa spoke sharply. Listen. Yes, I'm seeing Dean. But look at what I managed to find out during our meetings. If it wasn't for you, why would I gather all this information? Just say the word, and I won't communicate with him from today. His supposedly most devoted lover suddenly shouted. Fine. Call him right now. And don't forget to turn on the speaker. Vanessa yelled. Dean wondered if she would really call him and then actually break up. Dean liked Rita, but he could survive if she ended things. The call did come. Dean, listen. I need to tell you something important, she said to him. What happened, Rita? He tried to maintain a carefree tone. I told your wife about our relationship. Don't come to me anymore. It's all over. Suddenly, it seemed to him that she had wanted to say this for a long time. And it was as if she had breathed a sigh of relief when it finally happened. Maybe you'll reconsider. He knew Vanessa could hear him, so he added the most intimate velvety nuances to his voice. I've already thought about it. Goodbye. Well, and thanks for everything. It wasn't bad. With that, her voice cut off, and the line beeped. Thanks for not saying it was better sometimes, he replied sadly, even though she couldn't hear him anymore. Suddenly, Dean realized he would miss her, but he had to get back to eavesdropping. The sister told his wife that she deliberately befriended Chad's spouse. She works as a regular hairdresser in a beauty salon. One day, she complained to the sister that some woman named Marta often calls her husband, and they spend hours discussing his brother. They want to forge some documents and tell his wife that he deliberately took out loans to transfer them to her. and then run away. Initially, she urged her husband not to harm his brother and forgive him for the money incident. After all, they are living well now, and it's best to leave him alone. But Chad seems obsessed with revenge. Moreover, he gives quite a bit of money to this blonde. Although she usually doesn't snoop in her husband's phone, this situation greatly concerns her. That's how happy we were. Dean and his wife even visited us. She said Chad's wife showed Rita a photo where she recognized both her brother and sister, and Chad, whom she had considered just a partner who cheated on her before. "And what did you advise her?" Vanessa asked thoughtfully. "To tell you everything," the sister replied, and she said she didn't want to quarrel with her husband. "Well, yes. She said that conscience is important, but a spouse is for life." Chad even forbade her from telling anyone that she and Dean are siblings. They had a falling out a long time ago. Then they seemed to reconcile, but more for appearances, and Marta turns out to have a hidden agenda. I would have never thought. Always considered her a simple girl who just desperately wanted to get married. Dean thought. Nothing more interesting was discussed afterward. Dean was no longer mentioned, so there was nothing more to listen to. The sisters just chatted about their mother and miscellaneous matters. They even hugged and kissed. Rita said that Vanessa and her son could always move in with her, and her home was always open to them. He got tired of listening to this and disconnected. Too bad. If he had listened a little more, he would have learned the most important things. Vanessa suddenly asked her sister, "But why did you sleep with him back then?" "It hurt me a lot." She remained silent for a long time. And then she asked, "Are you sure you want an honest answer?" "It's not very pleasant." Vanessa nodded. Her life has never been pleasant. "What to do? You have to get used to it. When I met your husband, I saw that he made you unhappy. Dean chased after every skirt, and you seemed not to notice. No matter how I hinted, you acted like you didn't hear me. He even courted me, just for fun. Women were like objects to him. So I decided," the sister hesitated, "sleep with him to save me from him." Vanessa suddenly understood that she was telling the truth. She felt it in her heart and believed her. "Yes, remember how I was? Overweight, looking like a tramp in those awful old-fashioned glasses. But he didn't mind." The sister cried. "He's a scoundrel." Vanessa agreed. And she realized that a real close person had appeared next to her, despite everything. "If I'm honest, why did you get back with him?" Vanessa asked. "Because of Chad," she replied. They talked for a long time. It seemed as if the years of separation had never happened. Although the sisters didn't know each other that well, it suddenly stopped mattering. The bonds of blood united them instantly. After an hour, they decided that Vanessa should still have a conversation with Chad, but it had to be done extremely cautiously. Meanwhile, tired of listening to the women's chatter, Dean missed all the crucial events that were supposed to fundamentally change his life with his wife. After all, it was from his brother that he wanted to protect her. "So, did your sister take the bait?" Chad asked the frightened Rita the next day. She nodded sadly, and then asked nervously, "But will you really pay off her husband's debts? Everything as we agreed?" "Of course. Have I ever deceived you?" the man asked threateningly. She remembered that he found her in a shelter, cured her of alcoholism, provided housing, helped her get an education, and find a job. The condition then was only one. She had to seduce Dean and date him for at least a year. In return, she got the right to start a new life. That's how the homeless Molly became Rita, physical education teacher. She managed to change her life at the twilight of her years. But she would never agree to deal with that fool again if Chad hadn't explained that this was the only way to find out all the details of the cunning revenge plan against Dean's wife. "Let my sister consider me a traitor for the second time. But for myself, I'll know that I did the impossible for her," she thought at that moment. Of course, Rita suspected that Chad was a shady character and didn't reveal everything. But she hoped that when he asked for something else, she could somehow get out of it. And now, She had to persuade her sister that the best option was to seek help from this man. It seems there is no other way. If I refuse, my sister will be left without money. She pronounced her verdict after their conversation. Chad almost purred with pleasure, like a large predator. The prey was coming to him. What could be better? Finally, he would settle the score with the brother who deceived him. He would regret it a lot. Is there anything else you need from me? Rita asked timidly. No. After your sister arrives, we're settled. Just stay in touch with her for some time. About a month. It's important that she doesn't suspect anything. After all, we want to help her, he replied. He looked at her expectantly, with a hidden threat. Yes, of course. With that, Rita rushed out of Chad's office. The most anticipated call of the day came through. Vanessa was on the line. Chad, hello, can we talk? It's very urgent, she said to him. Well, I'm a bit busy, but you can come by after 8 in the evening. He graciously allowed. He didn't even greet her. Why bother? The hunt was almost over, and the prey was practically in his clutches. As you wish, she timidly replied. Who would doubt that any option would suit you, darling? I'm very good at forging documents, he thought to himself, but said nothing aloud. In the evening, the blonde arrived, right on time, so promptly, unlike before. Scared of the prospect of losing your apartment and savings. Women can endure anything, but not poverty. However, his wife was different. She was an exception. That's why he chose her. Most others were just mediocre. So, what brings you to me, Vanessa? He asked, although he already knew from Rita that she would now reveal what he had known for a long time. Well, you see, I love you. She stunned him. Chad almost fell off his chair. He expected a plaintive story about his dear son and a plea for help with her husband. And she was saying such things. What do you mean? I don't understand. He was speaking the truth now. You surely remember our night of love 13 years ago. I understood that you were aware of it during our last meeting. You hinted that you couldn't forget me. So, our feelings are mutual. Vanessa delivered a rehearsed speech and flitted her eyelashes. Is there nothing else you want to say? Did you come only for this? In reality, he had no need for a love-struck mad woman. He was waiting for a woman with problems willing to stoop to any low. Such a person could be controlled. But why would he need this fool? Chad loved his wife and had no plans to betray her. That night was an exception. He just really wanted to spite Dean. All the rest will be told by my lips. While he was figuring out what this might mean, Vanessa sat on his lap and planted a kiss on his narrow, dry mouth. But she didn't stop there. She started unbuttoning his shirt. Hey, stop it, darling. I didn't say I'm interested in this too, he finally exclaimed. She got off her knees but threw a tantrum. Chad couldn't stand women's crying. When his wife was sad, she just played and ate chips. But this one rolled her eyes, unbuttoned the cardigan, which already had too low a neckline, and further smidged her makeup. And what am I supposed to do with her now? He thought. Chad couldn't tell her something like, your sister told you yesterday, dummy, that your husband wants to shift his debts onto you. You've already accidentally signed the papers, and you crawled to me for salvation. Do you hope that a son conceived with me will soften my heart and all that? Or did everything fly out of your stupid blonde head? That would surely ruin everything, and the carefully prepared plan would collapse. So, he could ask Rita again to convey to her idiotic sister that love confessions are completely inappropriate. Maybe Rita deceived him. But that couldn't be. She provided a recording of the conversation with her sister, for which he had given her a tiny and inconspicuous recorder disguised as a pen. Click. The recording started, and from the outside, it looked like you just decided to record something. Vanessa, calm down. Have some water. I don't need another wife, and a mistress either. But believe me, I am your sincere friend. So, if you ever need anything, you can always turn to me. He tried to smile amiably, For some time, this insatiable lady poured out all the details of the formation of great love and passion on him. And since she almost kneeled asking him to allow her to pour it all out, he had to endure it. He was willing to endure a lot to achieve his goal. Although Chad was already nauseated by her confessions and foolish hopes, he honestly held on for another 40 minutes. Finally, she left with her cleavage, sighs, tears, snot, and Chad lost an hour of his time. However, the kiss was not bad, and the confessions sounded pleasant. After all, he was a man, and it always flatters the ego when a lovely woman confesses to hopeless feelings. But he sincerely hoped that this would not happen again. This was also mentioned by Rita when he called her after Vanessa left. Rita promised to talk to her sister again in a week, no earlier, so that she wouldn't suspect anything. Although Chad didn't want to wait, he had to agree that the idea was reasonable. "Well, has the love of my life called you already?" I hope he was disgusted by this love scene. Vanessa laughed. "Yes," he called in a voice as if you wanted to nail him. The sister laughed, "And we came up with such a cool plan with the recorder. We recorded it, but not everything." Vanessa rejoiced again. "And how did you come up with the idea that you can win time in such a clever way?" "I was already desperate," Rita asked. "It's all very simple. Chad is dry, a loner, a tech guy. There's nothing scarier for him than a woman in love, who, on top of that, is twice his height. You've seen his wife. He likes calm and petite women. So, I was sure that he wouldn't respond to me with reciprocity." Vanessa admitted. Now they got the desired delay, and they had time to think while Chad had no idea that Rita had told everything to her sister. "So, are we following the plan? You and Caleb hide where no one will look for you. At my place." Rita was thrilled to spend time with her sister and nephew. "Yes, I told him. He's very upset. Cried. Admitted that Dean didn't want to divorce me last summer out of spite. On the contrary, he was trying to save me. Says that he loves me. But he's on my side," Vanessa said sadly. Although she had long been approaching the moment of parting with her husband, now she wanted to believe again that her son was right, and Dean wasn't that bad. "In any case, there's no other way. Only this way can we find out who truly cares for you, who's a friend and who's an enemy," Rita comforted, patting her sister on the shoulder. "Well, you're right. It's just a pity about Phoebe. She'll worry when I suddenly disappear, and don't say anything to her," Vanessa complained. "Nothing to be done. We'll have to keep it a secret. The more people who know, the greater the risk," Rita wisely suggested. She even managed to get a month off from school for personal reasons. Although she faced the threat of dismissal, she had to confront the principal with the fact and hint at some very serious illness and the associated examinations. Her previous impoverished life taught her to be resourceful. "Vanessa, what's wrong with you? Why are you so sad today?" Dean asked her on the last day she spent in their shed apartment, where they seemed to have grown into each other, and had had to wait so many years to speak in a normal voice precisely when she decided to end this symbiosis. "Sorry, honey, you started turning into a prince too late," is what she would have liked to answer him. But it was already too late to argue and figure everything out. "Dean, everything's fine. It's just a little fatigue. Why are you suddenly concerned about my condition? Why are you home in the evening?" Quite unexpected, she decided to answer a question with a question. "Vanessa, I decided to end the adventures. My psychologist have been advising it for a long time. Let's try to start over. What do you think?" He looked at her searchingly, as if suspecting that she was about to dissolve. But everything was already thought out to the smallest detail. Caleb lied to his father, saying that he wants to choose a new computer together with his mom. After all, she also needs to find a new laptop, as the old one struggles with editing numerous photos. Dean had been preparing for this idea for several days, and waiting longer was impossible. Then Chad would be extracting answers about her, Vanessa, from Rita. And if she now shows weakness and just stays at home, It's unknown what such a ruthless person would do as punishment. There were the most unpleasant rumors about Chad. He was quiet and peaceful until a certain point. But then, for those who didn't listen to him, life reset was inevitable. They were returning to the conditions from which he had once pulled them. Certainly, Vanessa would never abandon her sister now. But if her husband indeed had such enormous debts that Dean wanted to hang on her, they would have to experience homelessness together. Phoebe is a good person, but she won't let them live with her. Money will help a little, but that's about it. Half of the mortgage for the apartment is still not paid off. Vanessa poorly remembered the years of wandering with her mom in the most dreadful shabby rooms and having macaroni every day without anything else. Her aunt used to tell her about it. She couldn't endure poverty, and she wouldn't risk everything for the love of a questionable character who tormented most of her life. Perhaps Dean tormented himself too, but that's not her problem anymore. It's time to pity herself. Actually, she hoped that her husband wouldn't be home today. Usually, on Wednesdays, he went to one of the Blans. But apparently, he sensed something. Dean had a pretty strong intuition. So now he literally drilled her with his gaze, clearly suspecting something. I won't be able to take a suitcase with clothes, she thought, comforting herself that everything would be clear soon. Meanwhile, she would have to go for the sporty style of her sister. Nothing deadly. Caleb. So we're going for computers, son? She asked her son with a faint carefree look. Of course, Mom. My birthday is coming up, and you promised. He replied with a phrase he had prepared in advance. It was clear that the guy could burst into tears at any moment. Caleb loved his father very much, but he held on as a teenager. Won't you take Dad with you? Dean suddenly asked. No, today is Mom's day. Vanessa tried her best to pretend that all this wasn't so important. It's just about her whim. Are you going to that store? Dean frowned. Yes, Dad, the son replied. Okay, maybe I'll drop by later. I won't disturb you, he said, and, seeing his son holding a bag with his favorite laptop, he asked, why are you taking it with you, Caleb? Why? I want to show that I'm not satisfied. The teenager didn't lose his composure. He already understood that everything didn't go according to plan. Dad won't leave anywhere today, so they have to act according to circumstances. Come back as soon as possible. I'll order your favorite pizza with cheese edges and parmesan. He waved to them as they left. Vanessa's heart shrank, and Caleb almost cried. Nevertheless, each of them waved back to their father. It had to be that way in life. Everything can be complicated. At that very inconvenient moment, Phoebe called and started telling some very long news. Phoebe, Caleb and I are getting into the elevator. I'll call you back when I get down, Vanessa said, and her heart squeezed even tighter. She wouldn't call her back for at least a couple of weeks, at best. After leaving the entrance, they knew Dean was looking out the window. So without coordinating, they confidently headed to the store. When they finally turned the corner, they sat down in the snow and cried, embracing. Mom, I feel so sorry for him. So sorry. Caleb cried. Me too, son. But I've explained it to you. The situation is dangerous. We need to figure everything out. You don't want to become homeless. Vanessa, of course, didn't say that Dean wasn't his real father. She only said that Dad was angry with Mom and wanted to deprive them of everything. They needed to figure out what to do and find out if it was true, or if the evil Uncle Chad forged the documents. I don't want that. Do you love Dad? The son suddenly asked. Yes, despite everything. Now she suddenly realized that this was true. Although there was a lot between her and Dean, she would stay with him even now. Only her son and sister stopped her from this insane act. For herself, she would never have dared. Mom, let's call a taxi then. Otherwise, Dad might go to the store for us. Did you see how suspiciously he looked at us? He always feels when someone is up to something, Caleb said. Although he was a teenager, common sense returned to him first. The taxi arrived in 5 minutes, and as they were leaving, She did see Dean, who, dressed quickly, hurriedly ran towards the store, looking around. But he didn't pay attention to the taxi. Here, we could cry in the snow for another 5 minutes, and the plan would fall apart, Caleb said, watching his father disappear around the corner. Yes, we can't prolong the suffering, Vanessa sighed. Although each of them implied something different, they were now united by a common desire to find out the truth and start fresh and honest. Is your husband beating you? The taxi driver turned around with a question and added, should I call the police? No, he's not beating me. Just morally torturing. Nothing special. Many people live like that. Vanessa sighed. Okay then. I overheard your conversation with the child and got worried for you. The taxi driver didn't say another word for the entire journey. Phones were turned off during the ride. The path to the old life was temporarily cut off. Oh, we've arrived. And hey, I was worried if you'd manage it. Rita greeted them at the entrance. What? Was there another way for us? I'm not ready to expose myself to another attack to Chad. Vanessa winked at her sister. She understood the meaning of the joke and laughed. What are you talking about? Caleb asked. Oh, just about movies. Vanessa replied. It felt inappropriate to share such a delicate episode of her fake confessions with her teenage son. Those confessions were meant to repel, not attract. For a week now, my wife and son have been missing. I found a note saying they need a break, and supposedly, they'll call in a month at most. I've contacted the police and search teams, but no one can help. Dean complained to his personal psychologist. Nothing else remained for now. Well, that's beyond my expertise, responded the elderly psychologist. I understand that perfectly. I just need to vent. Is she really leaving me for good? He covered his face with his hands. Before, Dean never seriously thought he could lose his wife. He believed things would eventually work out. Do you realize you've earned this for a long time? The psychologist looked at him sternly over his glasses. Shouldn't you be comforting me now? Dean protested. Perhaps I should, but I don't want to. It's time to get a grip, sighed the wise old man. But you know she's not a saint either. Dean listed all his wife's terrible actions. She had affairs to spite him, ignored him, gave birth to a child from a man he despises, sometimes drank excessively, gossiped about him with her friend. Yes, I know all that. And so do you. But that's not the question, the wise psychologist said. What is it then? Dean knew the answer himself, but wanted to hear it from someone else. Do you love her enough to stop competing and seeking revenge? He asked directly. Yes, Dean fervently replied. He went on about how he almost gave up all his mistresses, wanted to mend the relationship. Accepted Caleb. Almost doesn't count. Live as if she's already back, right here and right now, advised the psychologist. But what if she never comes back? Dean was crushed by this question but had to ask. Then she doesn't love you enough. Let her be happy without you, replied the ruthless old man. Dean wanted to stomp his feet, argue, but he just walked out silently. There was much to think about. That same evening, he called all his blondes and told them he was going back to his wife. Then simply blocked their numbers. If Vanessa comes back, I won't admit this to her for anything. She'll think I'm weak, he thought angrily. But he knew that if she returned, he wouldn't need anyone else ever again. Rita, where has your sister gone? Chad menacingly summoned her once again. I don't know. She said that since you don't love her, it's such a shame that she can't live in the same city with someone who rejected her. Rita brazenly lied with the most modest and obedient look. Where did she go? He repeatedly tried to find out. She didn't say anything. Rita shrugged. Okay. Wait. She'll probably show up soon. Chad graciously allowed. Thank you very much. I'll call you as soon as I find out something. Rita lied shamelessly again. The main thing was that they still had time. It was very much needed. Rita and Vanessa hired an experienced credit investigator to look into everything. He promised to check everything through some gray channels and find out who was really deceiving them. Chad, Dean, or both. But it would take 2 weeks. Caleb calmly accepted the fact that he hadn't left the house for almost 10 days. But for the active Vanessa, it was much more challenging. However, her projects were under reliable management. She warned that she was going through a difficult period in her family life, so she might disappear for a while. As for her admirers, she ended relations with the last one the day after receiving the note from her sister. She decided not to do anything out of revenge. Vanessa tried to start living for the love of close people and herself. Libido died early, but there was no need to pretend it wasn't so. The next day, they received the long-awaited response. Dean did deceive his brother and business partner for a considerable amount, but more than half of the money had already been transferred to him through one of the external firms under his control. As for the massive debts and signed documents that Chad waved in front of Rita, urging her to save her sister, they were simply fabricated. Yes, Dean's business wasn't going as well as his brother's, but there were no debts. And, moreover, he had secretly paid off the entire mortgage and even made a will for you. He ordered that in case of anything happening to him, his companies would be sold, and the money would be transferred to you. You misjudged him. Not every husband cares so much about his wife. The shadowy financial detective reproached Vanessa. To support his words, he provided all the documents. But why did he make a will? Is he sick? Vanessa suddenly got scared. Why don't you ask him yourself? If he endured your antics for so many years, you don't have to fear such a person. Her sister encouraged her. But what about your relationship with Chad? Vanessa was afraid of this gloomy, infantile blonde. Nothing. I've thought it all through. Remember the huge brooch I attached to your cardigan? Rita asked. Yes. You also said it was happy. Vanessa didn't understand why her sister was asking about this. That's right, Rita confirmed, and she showed her the tiny camera cleverly disguised as one of the beads. Oh no. So there's a recording of my disgusting behavior. Vanessa laughed. Yes, and Chad's wife won't like it. So I think we'll figure something out. If not, I wasn't expelled from school for skipping classes. Well, you'll cover the rent for the apartment. Rita winked at her. I agree to everything, said the sister. Rita didn't suggest the option of living together with Vanessa and her husband. It would be too ambiguous after the whole story. Although she never liked Dean, meeting with him was clearly not worth it. That's what they agreed with Vanessa. So, can you go back to this Dean? Phoebe asked once again. She still only saw the tip of the iceberg and didn't know that each of the spouses had a lot hidden in the past. Vanessa didn't explain anything to her about her disappearance. She just said that she needed to think. What can I do? I'm weak like that. I love him, and that's it. Vanessa smiled at her thoughts. Okay, do what you want. It's your life to decide. And what about Marta? Did you reject her? Phoebe asked. Well, she rejected Dean herself. It wasn't the truth either. But Phoebe was satisfied with this explanation. Everything returned to its usual course. Caleb played another computer game. The friend scolded men for causing suffering to women. And Vanessa never admitted that she almost drove her husband crazy. How much he endured from her. Well, she endured a lot from him too. But now, finally, they confessed to each other that they would start anew, with a clean slate. They reconciled. There was still time to make up for what was missed. It's enough to push each other. It's not so bad when you know the whole truth about a person and still love them, and they know everything about you but manage to accept it. That's life. When Phoebe left, she dialed her sister's number and asked, Rita, what's going on with Chad? The scene made a huge impression. He values his wife, so we won't hear anything else from him. Moreover, I recorded the material where he shakes fake papers and confesses that he hates your husband. Her sister said, okay. What about accommodation? She was worried about Rita. Now, she wouldn't abandon her in trouble for anything. If it weren't for her sister, who knows how everything would have ended. Chad signed the papers. He considers our contract fulfilled. I promised that you would come, and you came. But I beg you, if you happen to meet him, don't say that you pretended to be in love with him. That's your trump card. He's terrified of you now. He believes that you knew nothing about the recording. Rita laughed. Okay, I can pretend if I happen to see him. But I hope it doesn't happen. And does he claim anything about Caleb? Vanessa asked. No, he has enough children from his beloved wife. He just wanted to do a nasty thing to his brother for free and make you commit a couple of meanness together. Rita explained. Well, that's good. Caleb and I will come to you in a few days. You're okay with that? She asked her sister. I'll be glad. I love you. Rita always welcomed Vanessa. She knew that. In the evening, precisely at dinner time, Dean arrived. So, how are things here? He asked cheerfully. Dean couldn't stop thanking fate for his wife and son. Vanessa might not be perfect, and Caleb might not be his biological son, but they were his beloved and only family. He decided to stop pretending to be a ladies' man. Surprisingly, his hatred towards his mother and brother disappeared. Chad had given him the best gift in the form of a son. His mother openly admitted her dislike for him, helping him part ways with the brother he never really liked each other. That's how it goes. Born from the same mother, but there's no real kinship. Sometimes, a stranger is more pleasant and closer. Everything is good. Dean, Vanessa replied. You won't run away from me anymore. He winked at his wife and son. And you won't run away from us? Caleb asked. Well, of course not. The father understood the hint. We agreed that you and Mom declared a truce once and for all. No more fighting here, Caleb said. You're right, son. The parents replied without coordinating and laughed. A snowstorm raged outside. Someone, somewhere considered them imperfect. Someone, somewhere hated them. But now, they could withstand the cold and storms of the outside world. Now, Vanessa was not nobody's. Dean was not nobody's. And Caleb was not either. Together, they would stand up against anyone. The evening seemed endless. And then night fell. Vanessa suddenly felt that her libido was not dead at all. It was slowly returning to her. She quietly slipped into her husband's bedroom and said, So, do you still love me? Am I not too old and foolish for the magnificent man desired by all women? Vanessa, we've finished fighting and pretending, haven't we? We don't have much time ahead for happiness. Of course, I love you. I've been waiting and dreaming for you to come and tell me you love me. Honestly, I imagined you begging me to come back and chasing away my ladies. But now, that's no longer necessary. I sent them away myself.